The alien woman asked me to pretend to be her mate. Neither of us expected what happened next 3 months ago. If someone had told me that the most powerful woman in the Alliance would one day call me her mate, I would have laughed in their face. Not because she wasn't beautiful, not because she wasn't important, but because people like her didn't even notice people like me. Lady S.Y.T belonged to a family that controlled entire star systems. Kings respected her. Admirals feared her. Politicians spent fortunes trying to gain her favor. And I was a human maintenance engineer. The kind of person nobody remembered 5 minutes after leaving a room. Yet somehow, I ended up standing beside her while half the galaxy watched. And before that week was over, people would call me a hero, a fool, a liar, and a legend. But that's getting ahead of the story. It started on the worst day of my life. I was hanging upside down inside a maintenance shaft on Orion Station, trying to stop a power failure that threatened 3 docking bays. Sweat ran into my eyes, my back hurt, and my supervisor had already threatened to fire me twice that morning. Then my communicator beeped. "Daniel, stop what you're doing immediately." I frowned. The voice wasn't my supervisor. It wasn't security. It wasn't station command. It belonged to someone far more important. Before I could answer, a second message arrived. Lady S.Y.T requests a private meeting. For several seconds, I thought it had to be a mistake. People like Lady S.Y.T didn't request meetings with maintenance workers. They barely acknowledged our existence. Yet 10 minutes later, I found myself walking through one of the station's private gardens. Every step felt unreal. The place was silent, except for the sound of flowing water and distant machinery. And there she was, waiting for me. The most desired woman in known space. The woman thousands of powerful aliens dreamed of marrying. The woman whose face appeared on news networks across dozens of worlds. She turned as I approached. For a moment, those glowing violet eyes locked onto mine. Then she said something I never expected to hear. "Thank you for coming, Daniel. Not human. Not engineer. Not maintenance worker. Daniel." She knew my name. That alone was unsettling. But what she said next was far worse. "I need your help." I stared at her. "My help?" "Yes. Are you sure you have the right person?" A faint smile touched her lips. "Unfortunately, you are exactly the right person." That was the moment I should have walked away. Instead, I stayed. A decision that would change both of our lives forever. Because 30 minutes later, the most powerful woman in the Alliance would ask me a question so unbelievable that I genuinely thought she was joking. She looked directly into my eyes, took a slow breath, and quietly said, "Daniel, would you pretend to be my mate?" The universe seemed to stop. My brain stopped. Even my heartbeat forgot what it was doing. Out of all the possibilities I had imagined on the way here, that wasn't one of them. The silence after her question felt endless. "Daniel, would you pretend to be my mate?" For several seconds, I simply stared at her. Then I laughed. Not because it was funny. Because my brain refused to process what I had just heard. Unfortunately, Lady S.Y.T wasn't laughing, which meant she was serious. Very serious. "You're joking." "No, this is a prank." "No. Have you suffered some kind of head injury?" A tiny smile appeared on her face. "Also no." I rubbed my temples. This couldn't be happening. Across the galaxy, powerful nobles, military commanders, wealthy merchants, and influential politicians competed for her attention. Yet somehow she was asking a human maintenance engineer to pretend to be her mate. Nothing about this situation made sense. Why me? The question escaped before I could stop it. For a moment she looked away toward the stars beyond the glass walls. When she finally answered, her voice was quieter. "Because everyone else has an agenda." That caught my attention. "What do you mean?" "If I choose a noble, they gain power. If I choose a military officer, they gain influence. If I choose a politician, they gain supporters." She turned back toward me. "But you gain nothing. I wasn't sure whether to feel complimented or insulted. Her smile widened slightly. That is exactly why I trust you. Trust. The word felt strange coming from someone like her. Trust wasn't something powerful people gave away easily, especially not to strangers. Yet somehow she seemed sincere. Before I could respond, a notification flashed across her wrist display. The color drained slightly from her face. What is it? They've arrived. Something in her tone made my stomach tighten. Who? My family. That explained everything. Or rather, it explained why she suddenly looked nervous. A moment later, the doors to the garden opened. 5 figures entered. The instant they appeared, I understood why people feared House Valoran. They carried themselves like rulers. Not politicians. Not celebrities. Rulers. The kind of people who expected entire worlds to obey them. At their center walked an older male with silver markings across his skin. His presence alone seemed to dominate the room. Even before S.Y.T spoke, I knew who he was. Lord Valoran. Her father. One of the most powerful individuals in the Alliance. His eyes landed on me immediately. The look he gave me was the same look a scientist might give an unexpected insect. Interesting, but insignificant. I suddenly became very aware of my grease-stained work uniform. This was going badly already. S.Y.T, his voice was calm. Too calm. We were told you wished to introduce someone. I do. She took a step forward. Then something unexpected happened. Her hand slipped into mine. Every muscle in my body froze. The room became silent. Even the attendants seemed shocked. I could feel dozens of eyes focused on us. Waiting, judging, calculating. For a brief second I considered running. Then I remembered that running from one of the most powerful families in the galaxy was probably a terrible career decision. So I stood my ground. Barely. This is Daniel. No title. No explanation. Just Daniel. Her father studied me carefully. The silence stretched. 5 seconds. 10 seconds. 15. I had faced station inspections before. None of them compared to this. Finally he spoke. A human. Not an insult. Not praise. Just an observation. Yet somehow it felt heavier than either. Yes, his eyes shifted to our joined hands. Then back to his daughter. I see. The problem was that he clearly didn't. Neither did anyone else. Whispers spread throughout the room. Confusion, shock, disbelief. One woman actually looked offended, as if my existence personally inconvenienced her. A younger noble stepped forward. His expensive clothing and arrogant expression told me everything I needed to know. This was someone accustomed to getting whatever he wanted. His gaze fixed on me, then he laughed. You're serious? Nobody answered. Unfortunately, he continued. Out of everyone in the Alliance, you chose a maintenance worker? There it was. The contempt. The thing humans had become familiar with since joining galactic society. Some species respected us, others didn't. This man clearly belonged to the second group. I expected S.Y.T to respond. Instead, she remained silent, waiting, watching, almost as though she wanted to see what I would do. Interesting, very interesting. The noble folded his arms. Tell me, human. His smile wasn't friendly. What exactly makes you worthy of Lady S.Y.T? The garden became silent again. Everyone waited. Even S.Y.T. Especially S.Y.T. I considered several responses. Most of them would probably start a diplomatic incident. Eventually, I settled on the safest option. I have absolutely no idea. For a moment, nobody moved. Then several attendants tried and failed to hide their laughter. The noble blinked. Clearly, that wasn't the answer he expected. I shrugged. Honestly, I was wondering the same thing. More laughter. Even S.Y.T looked amused. The noble's expression darkened. Because the worst thing you can do to an arrogant person isn't insult them. It's refuse to be intimidated. For the first time all evening, I saw uncertainty in his eyes. Good. Now we were making progress. Lord Valoran continued watching me, carefully, analyzing, measuring, as though trying to solve a puzzle. Eventually he spoke. You are remarkably calm. I nearly laughed. If only he knew. Inside, I was experiencing approximately 17 different panic attacks, but years of emergency repairs had taught me one useful skill. Never let people see you panic. Especially when everything is on fire. Metaphorically or otherwise. I try my best. A faint smile appeared on the older man's face. Not approval, but not disapproval either. That alone surprised everyone, including Saralith. I noticed the brief look of relief in her eyes. The first obstacle had been cleared. Barely, but the real challenge was still ahead. Because tomorrow night would be the Grand Assembly. Thousands of nobles, military leaders, corporate dynasties, political representatives, the most powerful people in known space. And according to the official announcement that had just been released across the Alliance, Lady Saralith would be attending with her chosen mate. Me, a human maintenance engineer. And if tonight's reaction was any indication, the entire galaxy was about to lose its mind. By the next evening, every major news network in the Alliance was talking about one thing. Lady Saralith and the human. Me. Some headlines called it a political stunt. Others called it a scandal. One commentator spent 20 minutes explaining why the relationship was obviously fake. Ironically, that commentator happened to be completely correct. The problem was that nobody believed him. The Grand Assembly Hall was already overflowing when we arrived. Thousands of representatives filled the massive chamber. Nobles, generals, scientists, corporate dynasties, ambassadors, the most powerful beings in known space. And every single one of them turned toward us the moment we entered. I had never seen so many important people gathered in one place. I had also never seen so many people look so confused. Saralith moved with perfect confidence. I simply tried not to trip over my own feet. "Relax," she whispered. "Easy for you to say." A faint smile touched her lips. "You are doing surprisingly well. I'm one accidental fall away from becoming a galactic meme." That earned a small laugh. A genuine one. For a moment I forgot thousands of eyes were watching. Then we reached the center of the hall, and the whispers began. Again, some were curious, others were hostile. A few openly mocked me. One noble actually asked whether humans had recently become an endangered species, and this was some kind of charity project. Classy. Very classy. I ignored them. Years of working maintenance had taught me something important. When people underestimate you, let them. Their assumptions become your advantage. The evening continued. Speeches, announcements, political negotiations. Exactly as boring as it sounded. Then, everything changed. The first explosion shook the building so hard that several chandeliers shattered. The hall erupted into chaos. People screamed. Security teams rushed forward. A second explosion followed seconds later. This one much closer. Emergency lights flooded the chamber. Red, flashing alarms echoed through every corridor. For a brief moment, nobody understood what was happening. Then the station's AI spoke. Its voice carried throughout the assembly hall. "Warning, unauthorized vessels detected. Defensive perimeter breached. Hostile boarding action in progress." The room went silent. Every face turned pale. Because there was only one group reckless enough to attack a gathering like this. The Karok Raiders. The most feared pirate coalition in Alliance space. And they had just attacked the most important political event of the year. "Move," shouted security officers. Panic exploded across the chamber. Representatives rushed toward emergency exits. Guards formed defensive lines. The elegant political gathering instantly transformed into a battlefield. Then gunfire erupted somewhere nearby. A lot of gunfire. The attackers were already inside. My stomach dropped. This wasn't a robbery. This wasn't a threat. This was an assassination attempt. And judging by the chaos around us, it had been planned extremely well. Saralith grabbed my arm. "We need to go." I nodded. For once, that sounded like excellent advice. We moved toward a secure evacuation route along with dozens of others. Unfortunately, we never reached it. The corridor ahead exploded. Metal fragments filled the air. People were thrown backward. Several security officers hit the ground. A group of armored raiders emerged through the smoke. Their weapons were already firing. The crowd scattered. Some screamed. Others froze. A few tried to fight. Most failed. Everything happened so fast that my brain barely kept up. One moment we were attending a political gathering. The next we were trapped in a war zone. The lead raider raised his weapon toward the crowd. Toward S.Y.T. Without thinking, I shoved her sideways. The energy blast missed her by less than a meter. The wall behind us exploded. Pain shot through my shoulder as debris struck me. But we were alive. That was what mattered. For now. The attackers advanced. Security forces returned fire. The corridor became absolute chaos. And then I noticed something. A maintenance access panel, half hidden behind a damaged support beam. Normally nobody would pay attention to it. I did. Because maintenance workers notice things other people ignore. An idea formed instantly. A dangerous idea, which unfortunately meant it was probably the right one. S.Y.T, what? I think I can stop them. She stared at me. Several explosions sounded nearby. The timing could have been better. You can what? I think I can shut down this entire section. Her eyes widened. Then understanding appeared. The attackers depended on station systems, doors, navigation, power, communications. If those systems suddenly failed, their operation would collapse. It was risky. Extremely risky. But possible. The problem was reaching the control node, and unfortunately, it was located directly behind enemy lines. Wonderful. Just wonderful. Before she could object, I started moving. Daniel. I ignored her. Not because I wanted to. Because there wasn't time. I sprinted through the corridor. Energy bolts flashed around me. Several struck the walls nearby. One came close enough for me to feel the heat. A security officer shouted something. I didn't hear it. My entire focus remained fixed on the access hatch ahead. 10 meters. 5, 3, I dove through the opening. A second later, an explosion rocked the corridor behind me. Then I was inside the maintenance network. Dark, cramped, familiar. For the first time all evening, I felt comfortable. Funny how that worked. I crawled forward as fast as possible. Alarms blared through the station. Emergency messages flooded every screen. The battle was spreading. Fast, if I failed, thousands could die. Including S.Y.T. That thought pushed me harder than anything else. Several minutes later, I reached the primary systems junction, the station's digital heart. I connected my tablet, started typing, and prayed. Come on. Come on. Work. For one horrible second, nothing happened. Then the screen flashed green. Access granted. I smiled. The pirates were about to have a very bad day. Across the station, systems changed instantly. Blast doors slammed shut. Corridors sealed. Elevators locked. Navigation grids collapsed. Internal sensors isolated hostile positions. Within seconds, the attackers found themselves trapped. Separated, blind, confused, exactly where Alliance security wanted them. The tide turned immediately. Security teams counterattacked. Pirate formations broke apart. Their carefully planned assault began to collapse, and all across Orion Station, people watched in disbelief as a boarding action that should have succeeded suddenly fell apart. Less than 20 minutes later, the battle was over. The pirates surrendered. The station survived. And somehow, so did I. When I finally emerged from the maintenance network, exhausted and covered in dust, I found S.Y.T waiting. The moment she saw me, relief flooded her face. Not political relief. Not diplomatic relief. Personal relief. She crossed the distance between us without hesitation. Then she threw her arms around me. For several seconds, neither of us spoke. Around us, soldiers, diplomats, and nobles watched in complete silence. Because they had all just learned something unexpected. The human maintenance engineer they had mocked had saved every person in the assembly, including them. And for the first time since this strange arrangement began, I realized the biggest danger wasn't the pirates. It wasn't politics. It wasn't the powerful families of the Alliance. It was the way S.Y.T was looking at me now. Because that look wasn't part of the act anymore, there are moments that divide your life into two parts: before and after. Saving Orion Station was one of those moments. For the next several days, the entire Alliance seemed obsessed with a single story: the human who saved the Grand Assembly. News channels replayed security footage around the clock. Commentators analyzed every decision I had made. Military experts debated how a maintenance engineer had succeeded where trained strategists had failed. Politicians called me a hero. Journalists called me a mystery. A few nobles called me lucky. Those nobles were mostly the same people who had spent the previous week mocking me. Funny how quickly opinions changed. I hated every second of it. The attention, the interviews, the public appearances, the endless questions. None of it felt real. Because every time people praised me, I remembered one important fact: I hadn't done it alone. Hundreds of security officers had fought that day. Engineers had worked non-stop. Medical teams had saved lives. Yet somehow my name had become the headline. And while the galaxy celebrated, a different problem was quietly growing. A problem named S.Y.T. Because after the attack, something had changed between us. Something neither of us seemed willing to talk about. At first I tried to ignore it. That strategy lasted approximately 6 hours. The problem was impossible to ignore. The smiles lasted longer. The conversations became more personal. The comfortable silence between us felt natural. Dangerously natural. We still called it an arrangement. Still referred to it as an act. Still pretended nothing had changed. But both of us knew the truth. The act was becoming real. And that terrified me. Not because I didn't care about her. Because I cared far too much. One evening I found myself standing once again in the observation garden where everything had begun. Stars filled the darkness beyond the glass. The same stars. The same garden. Yet everything felt different. Footsteps approached behind me. I didn't need to turn around. I already knew who it was. Couldn't sleep? S.Y.T asked softly. Not really. She moved beside me. For several moments, neither of us spoke. The silence wasn't uncomfortable. If anything, it felt familiar. Finally, she broke it. My father wishes to meet you. I nearly choked. That's somehow more terrifying than the pirate attack. A laugh escaped her lips. A real laugh. The kind I had grown unexpectedly fond of. You're serious? Completely wonderful, she smiled. Unfortunately, that smile made me forget how nervous I was. An increasingly common problem. For a while, we simply watched the stars. Then she spoke again. Do you remember what you asked me on the day we met? I frowned. I asked a lot of questions. The first one. I thought back. Then remembered. Why me? She nodded. Yes, I smiled. I'm still curious about that. Her expression softened. For the first time since I'd known her, she seemed uncertain. Lady S.Y.T, the woman who could negotiate with admirals and politicians without blinking. Suddenly nervous. That got my attention immediately. She took a slow breath, then looked directly into my eyes. At first I chose you because you were safe. I listened quietly. You had no political ambitions. No hidden agenda. No desire for power. Her gaze never left mine. You were the only person who looked at me as a person instead of an opportunity. My heart began beating faster. Dangerously faster. She continued. Then the arrangement began. A small smile appeared. And everything became complicated. I laughed softly. That's one way to describe it. Daniel. Something in her voice made me stop smiling. This wasn't a casual conversation anymore. This was something else. Something important. Something neither of us could avoid any longer. I need to tell you the truth. For a moment, neither of us moved. The stars seemed impossibly distant. The entire universe felt silent. Then she spoke the words that changed everything. The arrangement stopped being an act for me. My breath caught. She looked away briefly, as though gathering courage. Then she looked back, and this time there was nowhere to hide. No matter how many times I told myself otherwise, no matter how hard I tried to remain logical, I fell in love with you. The words hung between us. Simple, honest, terrifying. For several seconds I couldn't speak. Not because I didn't know what to say. Because I'd imagined this moment 100 times, and somehow none of those imagined conversations had prepared me for the real thing. A faint sadness appeared in her eyes. Perhaps she mistook my silence. Perhaps she thought she already knew the answer. She started to step back. I caught her hand before she could. Her eyes widened. "Saralith," my voice came out quieter than intended. "I've been trying not to fall in love with you for weeks." For the first time since meeting her, the elegant, composed noblewoman disappeared, and the happiest smile I had ever seen appeared in her place. A smile so genuine it stole every remaining thought from my mind. "You have?" I laughed. "You make it sound surprising. A little. Why? Because you are smarter than I am." That made me laugh harder. The next moment, she was laughing too. And somehow that felt even better. Neither of us noticed the audience, at least not immediately. A polite cough interrupted the moment. We turned and froze. Standing near the entrance to the garden was Lord Valoran, along with several attendants. Wonderful timing. Absolutely wonderful. For one horrifying second, nobody spoke. Then the older man sighed dramatically. I waited 3 weeks. His expression remained perfectly serious. 3 weeks. Neither of us knew what to say. Finally, he shook his head. "I was beginning to think neither of you would figure it out." The attendants immediately looked away to hide their amusement. Saralith turned bright blue with embarrassment. Apparently that was the alien equivalent of blushing. "Good to know. Very good to know." Lord Valoran approached slowly. Then he looked directly at me. The same man who had once viewed me as insignificant. The same man who had doubted me. The same man who now extended his hand. "You have my blessing." For a moment I genuinely couldn't believe it. Then I shook his hand. The older noble smiled faintly. "Welcome to the family, Daniel, the family." The words felt unreal, yet somehow right. Months later, historians would describe our relationship as a turning point in alliance history. Trade agreements expanded, human worlds gained greater influence, old prejudices began to fade. Species that once distrusted one another started working together. Politicians would spend years debating why. The answer was actually very simple. It wasn't diplomacy. It wasn't power. It wasn't politics. It was two people who never expected to meet. A noblewoman searching for an escape, and a maintenance engineer trying to survive another workday. Neither of us expected what happened next. But sometimes the most important events in history begin with the most unexpected question. Would you pretend to be my mate? And somewhere along the way, we stopped pretending.